The rain in Atlanta didn't fall that October night. It attacked. Imani Beaumont stood on the curb of Peachtree Battle Avenue with a black trash bag clutched against her chest, mascara bleeding down her cheeks in charcoal rivers she no longer had the strength to wipe. Inside that bag was everything 6 years of her life had been reduced to: 3 cocktail dresses, a hair bonnet, her grandmother's Bible, and the ceramic mug she'd bought the morning she'd accepted Terrence's proposal. 28 years old, barefoot, because he hadn't even given her time to grab her shoes. The door of the Tudor-style house behind her, the house her paycheck had made mortgage payments on for 4 years, slammed shut with a finality that echoed down the wet street. Somewhere inside, a woman was laughing, a woman who was not her. "Please?" Imani had whispered 30 seconds earlier, palms pressed against Terrence's chest. "It's storming. Just let me call an Uber from the porch." He'd looked at her the way you look at a receipt you're about to crumple. "You embarrass me, Imani. Standing here begging in wet clothes. Walk." So she walked. 2 blocks. 3. Cars hissed past. Tires spraying gutter water up her calves. Her phone was dead. Her sister was in Houston. Her mother was buried under a magnolia tree in Savannah. And every single person she'd once called family, she had traded away, one by one, to make Terrence Whitmore happy. At the corner of Peachtree and West Wesley, she sank to her knees on the sidewalk. The trash bag split. Her grandmother's Bible tumbled into a puddle. That was when the headlights slowed. Onyx black, silent as a held breath. A Maybach. The rear window descended 2 inches, and a man's voice, low, precise, unmistakably foreign, said 4 words that would rearrange her entire life. "Get in. You're safe." But to understand how Imani Beaumont ended up kneeling in a puddle in front of a Korean billionaire's car, we need to go back. This story is for every woman who has ever shrunk herself to fit inside a man's ego. For every woman who paid the bills, cooked the meals, forgave the lies, and still got called ungrateful. For every woman who was told she was too much and not enough in the same breath. If that's ever been you, if you've ever wondered whether the love you're pouring into someone will ever, just once, be poured back, I need you to do 2 things right now. Hit that subscribe button and drop the word worthy in the comments. Because by the end of this story, you're going to understand exactly why that word belongs to you. What Imani didn't know as she climbed into the back of that Maybach was that the man behind the tinted glass wasn't a stranger at all. And the reason he had stopped for her? It had nothing to do with the rain. 6 years earlier, Imani Beaumont had been the youngest senior paralegal at Hollingsworth & Vane, one of Atlanta's most powerful corporate law firms. She'd earned her spot the hard way: night classes at Georgia State while working 2 jobs, a windowless studio in East Point, and a stack of unopened credit card statements she kept in a shoebox under the bed. Her mother had died her sophomore year of college. Her father had stopped answering the phone the summer after the funeral. All she had left was her older sister Nia, a nurse in Houston, and a stubborn refusal to let her mother's dreams die with her. Terrence Whitmore walked into her life on a Tuesday in March. He was 32, a mid-level marketing manager at a beverage company, with a charm that felt custom-tailored and a smile that made waiters bring extra bread. On their 3rd date, he told her she was the first woman he'd ever met who made him want to be better. She'd cried in the ladies' room at Bone's Steakhouse because no one had ever said anything like that to her before. 6 months in, he moved into her apartment because his lease was predatory. A year in, they bought the Tudor on Peachtree Battle together, except the down payment came from her savings, and the mortgage was in her name because his credit had been sabotaged by an old business partner. She told herself that was fine. Partners help each other. 2 years in, Terrence decided he was going to launch his own consulting agency. He needed to focus. He needed her to cover the household expenses, just for a few months. The few months became a year. The year became 3. The consulting agency became a LinkedIn page with no clients. Meanwhile, Imani was promoted twice. She was pulling $90,000 a year plus bonuses, running point on multi-million-dollar mergers, and coming home at 9 p.m. to a sink full of his dishes, and a man who complained she never had time for him anymore. When she asked him to contribute, he called her materialistic. When she asked him to help with laundry, he called her controlling. When her sister Nia flew in for Thanksgiving and asked gently why Terrence had described Imani's promotion as his success at dinner, Imani snapped at Nia for the first time in her life. Nia flew home the next morning. They didn't speak for 8 months. That was the pattern. Every friend who raised an eyebrow, every cousin who asked a hard question, every co-worker who noticed she'd stopped laughing. Terrence had a reason they were jealous, toxic, or trying to break them apart. And one by one, Imani cut them loose. Because loving Terrence had become the same thing as being alone with Terrence. The lie she believed was simple, and it was suffocating. She believed that if she just gave a little more, one more paycheck, one more forgiveness, one more silent night alone in bed while he stayed out, eventually he would see her. Eventually he would rise to meet her. Eventually the man she'd been building would step into the frame. But the man never came. Because the man had always been the boy she was carrying. The night everything ended started with a text from an unknown number, a photograph. Terrence at a rooftop bar downtown, his hand on the small of a woman's bag. The woman was wearing Imani's missing green silk dress, the one she'd assumed the dry cleaner had lost 6 weeks earlier. She left work at 4 p.m. She drove home in a fog. She walked in the front door at 4:30, and the woman from the photograph was sitting at Imani's kitchen island, drinking wine from Imani's crystal, wearing Imani's dress. Terrence came down the stairs in a bathrobe, saw Imani, and had the audacity to look annoyed. "You're home early," he said. Not, "I'm sorry," not, "I can explain," just, "You're home early." Imani opened her mouth to speak, and what came out was 6 years of swallowed screams. The Maybach's interior smelled of cedar and something faintly citrus, like a garden after rain. The seats were cream leather so soft they seemed to breathe. Imani sat with the ruined trash bag on her lap, water pooling around her bare feet on a floor mat that probably cost more than her first car. The man beside her did not look at her right away. He was studying his phone, thumbs moving across the screen with a stillness that felt trained. Late 30s, maybe 40. Black suit, no tie. White shirt, open one button. Sharp jaw, sharper eyes. A silver watch that gleamed like a small weapon at his wrist. And when he finally turned his head, she realized he was startlingly handsome, in a way that had nothing to do with softness. "My driver is taking us to the Mandarin Oriental," he said. His English was crisp, only faintly accented. "There is a room in your name at the front desk. Clothes will be sent up within the hour. You do not owe me an explanation for any of this." Imani stared at him. I don't know you." "You don't," he agreed. "But I know you, Miss Beaumont." Her stomach dropped. "How do you know my name?" He set the phone face down on the armrest between them and turned to face her fully for the first time. Under the passing streetlights, his eyes were black as wet slate. "My name is Dohyun Seo," he said. 3 years ago, my company acquired a controlling interest in a logistics firm called Meridian South. Your firm, Hollingsworth and Vane, handled the American side of the deal. You were the paralegal who reorganized the entire indemnity schedule at 2 a.m. on a Sunday when your senior partner missed a filing deadline. That schedule saved my company $41 million. Imani blinked at him. She remembered that night. She remembered eating cold lo mein at her desk and crying quietly in the bathroom afterward, because Terrence had called her selfish for not coming home. I never met you," she said. "No. You met my American attorneys. But I read every document that crosses my desk, Miss Beaumont. And I remember every name attached to work that saves me money." "Then why—" Her voice cracked. She pressed her palm against her mouth and breathed until she could speak again. "Why are you here tonight?" "On this street?" Dohyun was quiet for a long moment. The Maybach glided through the wet dark, tires whispering on the asphalt. "I was returning from a dinner in Buckhead," he finally said. "My driver takes Peachtree Battle because it is quieter. I saw a woman kneeling in the rain. I told him to slow the car because a woman kneeling in the rain in that neighborhood, in a work blouse without shoes, is not a woman who is lost. It is a woman who has been discarded." She looked away, out the rain-streaked window. Her cheeks burned. "When I got closer," he continued, softer now, "I recognized you, from a photograph in a case file, and I made a decision." "What decision?" He hesitated. It was the first hesitation she'd seen from him, and it made him human. "A decision," he said carefully, "that I will explain to you tomorrow, when you have slept and eaten. Not tonight. Tonight, you need to be safe. Everything else can wait." The Maybach turned onto Peachtree Street. The lights of the Mandarin Oriental rose ahead like a lantern in the fog, and Imani, who had spent 6 years being carefully managed by a man who wanted her small, could not remember the last time someone had simply told her she needed to rest. She began to cry again, silently this time, and Dohyun Seo, worth several $billion, did not offer her a tissue or a platitude. He simply turned his face toward the window, giving her the privacy to fall apart without an audience. The suite on the 42nd floor had a bathtub the size of her old kitchen, and a view of the Atlanta skyline that made the city look like a fallen constellation. A woman named Ms. Han, calm and impeccable in a gray pantsuit, had met her at the door with a folded set of silk pajamas, a toothbrush still in its packaging, and a plate of juk, Korean rice porridge, because, she said, Mr. Seo did not believe in serving cold food to people who had been in cold rain. Imani slept for 11 hours. She woke to soft light, a room service tray on the console, and a note in precise handwriting on hotel stationery. "When you are ready, join me in the penthouse dining room. There are things you need to know. D.S." She dressed in the clothes that had appeared overnight, a cream sweater, dark trousers, ballet flats, all in her exact size, and rode the elevator up 2 floors with her heart in her throat. Dohyun was at a long walnut table by the window, sunlight cutting across a spread of documents, coffee, and cut fruit. He rose when she entered. He did not smile, but something in his eyes softened. "Sit," he said. "Eat, then we talk." She sat. She could not eat. She folded her hands in her lap and waited. He watched her for a moment, then slid a manila folder across the table. "Terrence Whitmore," he said, "your former partner." Imani's breath caught. "How do you—" "Ms. Beaumont, I found you crying on a sidewalk at 11:30 at night. Before I offered you a room in my hotel, I needed to know whether the man who put you there was going to become my problem. So I made 3 phone calls. This folder is what my security team compiled between 1 a.m. and 6 a.m. She opened it slowly. Her hands began to shake. Terrence had not been idle during their 6 years together. He had 3 active checking accounts she had never seen. 1 in his name, 1 in his mother's name, 1 in the name of a shell LLC called Whitmore Consulting Partners. Over the past 4 years, he had funneled approximately $380,000 into those accounts. Money that had come, in traceable patterns, from a home equity line of credit taken out against the tutor on Peachtree Battle. The tutor was in her name. The HELOC was in her name. She had never signed for it. "He forged your signature," Dohyun said quietly. "My people confirmed it against your notarized documents from the Meridian filing. It is not a close forgery. It is bank fraud, Ms. Beaumont. Federal." Imani's ears were ringing. There was more. A woman named Chelsea Voss, the woman in the green silk dress, was listed as a co-signer on one of the accounts. She had been receiving deposits for 18 months. She was not a mistress Terrence had picked up last week. She was a partner in the theft. "There is one more thing." Dohyun's voice did not change. That was almost worse. "Your name is also on a life insurance policy Terrence took out 2 years ago. $500,000. He is the sole beneficiary." Imani looked up at him. The Atlanta skyline blurred behind his shoulder. "He was going to—" "I do not know his intentions," Dohyun said carefully. "I know what the paperwork shows. I know that 6 months ago he began asking questions in certain circles about how life insurance investigations are conducted in cases of accidental death. Those questions were noticed. That is how the pattern was flagged when I made my calls." The room tilted. Imani gripped the edge of the table. She had walked out of that house last night believing she had lost the man she loved. Now she understood that she had walked out of a house where the man she loved had been quietly, patiently, methodically preparing to end her. "I need you to breathe, Miss Beaumont," Dohyun said. And when she could not, he came around the table, knelt beside her chair, a Korean billionaire kneeling on marble in a bespoke sode, and simply placed his hand over hers until the shaking slowed. "You are not going back to that house," he said. "But you are not running from it either. If you will let me, I would like to help you take it apart. Legally, publicly, completely." She met his eyes. "Why?" she whispered. "Because," he said, 3 years ago you saved my company $41 million, and no one in your firm even told you thank you. I am telling you now, and I pay my debts." The rain had stopped by the time Imani stood at the penthouse window, arms wrapped around herself, watching downtown Atlanta glitter in the wet noon light. Behind her, Dohyun waited. He had not pushed. He had not sold. He had laid the folder on the table and given her the room to decide whether she wanted to know herself as a victim or as something else. She turned around. "Tell me what you're offering, exactly, and tell me what it costs." Something like approval flickered across his face. "Sit," he said. She sat. "I am offering 3 things," he began. "First, legal representation. My personal counsel in the United States is a firm called Ashcroft, Pennington & Co. They will file federal charges against Terrence Whitmore for bank fraud, wire fraud, and forgery. They will file civil suits to recover the stolen funds and to void the HELOC. They will pursue the insurance company for negligent underwriting. This will be aggressive. It will be public. You will be a witness. You will testify. It will not be comfortable. Second," he continued, "I am offering employment. My company, Seo Holdings, is opening a compliance and cross-border transactions office in Atlanta this January. I need someone who understands American contract law, who can work with Korean legal teams, and who does not flinch under pressure. The salary is $180,000. You would report to a managing director, not to me. I want that boundary clear." Imani's mouth went dry. It was double what she made at Hollingsworth. "Third," he said, and his voice changed. It grew quieter. "I am offering my personal protection until this is finished. Terrence Whitmore is a man who has been planning to profit from your death. I do not think he is a violent man. I think he is a coward. But cowards become dangerous when they realize they are losing everything. 2 of my security staff will be with you at all times until he is in custody. They will be discreet. You will not see them unless you need them, but they will be there." He folded his hands. "That is what I am offering. Now, the cost." She braced. "The cost," he said, "is that you will owe me nothing. No debt of gratitude, no obligation of loyalty, no romantic entanglement, expected or implied. When this is over, you will have every legal right to walk out of my life and never think of me again. If you accept my help, you accept it as a professional and as a woman, not as someone who is being rescued. I do not rescue people. I invest in them. Investments must be free to choose their own returns." Imani stared at him. "That's not a cost," she said finally. "That's a gift." He almost smiled. "The cost, Miss Beaumont, is that from this moment forward you will have to stop being the woman who apologizes for taking up space. That is the hardest cost I know of. Many people cannot pay it." She looked down at her hands. The nails were chipped. There was still a faint smudge of Peachtree Battle Avenue dirt on her wrist. She thought of her mother, dying in a hospice bed in Savannah, whispering, "Baby, don't you dare shrink for anybody." She thought of her sister Nia, whom she had not spoken to in almost a year because Terrence had made her choose. She thought of the ceramic mug in the ruined trash bag downstairs. The mug she had bought thinking she was building a future, when what she had really been building was a cage. She raised her head. "I accept all 3. "Good," he said, "but I have a condition of my own." His eyebrow lifted. "I want to call my sister today, from this room. And I want your best publicist to help me make sure that when this story breaks, my name is on it as the woman who fought back." Not as the woman who was almost killed. Dohyun considered her for a long moment, and then slowly he did smile. A small, real smile that changed his entire face. "Ms. Beaumont," he said, "you are going to be very good at this job." The first blow landed on a Thursday morning, 17 days after the rain. Federal agents arrived at the Tudor on Peachtree Battle at 6 a.m. with a search warrant, a forensic accountant, and enough patience to disassemble Terrence Whitmore's life one drawer at a time. Chelsea Voss was arrested in her yoga pants on the front lawn, while a neighbor filmed from across the street. Terrence was taken in for questioning at 9:15 and released on bond by 6 p.m., but by then the seizure orders had frozen every account he had, and the story was already climbing local news. Imani watched the arrest from a car parked 1 block away, sunglasses on, Ms. Han beside her in the driver's seat. She did not cry. She did not celebrate. She simply watched, and when Terrence was walked out in cuffs, she said quietly, "That's the same walkway he made me carry his mother's suitcase up in the summer of 2022. Ms. Han said nothing, but she reached over and squeezed Imani's hand once, firm before starting the car. The next battle was quieter and harder. Imani filed for a protective order the following Monday. She sat in a courtroom in downtown Atlanta and read aloud, in her own steady voice, the timeline of every account, every forged signature, every question Terrence had asked about accidental death investigations. Her lawyer, a soft-spoken Korean-American attorney named Grace Ko from Ashcroft, Pennington & Co., sat beside her and did not need to say much. The documents spoke. Terrence's public defender tried to paint Imani as a scorned girlfriend using federal law as a weapon of jealousy. The judge, a black woman in her 60s named Judge Renata Holloway, listened for exactly 12 minutes before she leaned forward and said, "Counselor, I have been on this bench for 19 years, and I have never once seen a scorned girlfriend forge a haylock against her own house. Sit down." The protective order was granted. So was a temporary injunction freezing the sale of the Tudor. Then came the harder work, the daily, invisible work of dismantling a life she had built on someone else's fiction. Imani closed the joint accounts. She canceled the credit cards Terrence had used her income to secure. She met with the mortgage lender and, with Grace Ko's help, began the process of proving the HELOC had been fraudulently opened. And she set the first boundary of the rest of her life. Her Aunt Cheryl called from Macon, weeping. "Baby, I heard on the news." "You need to drop this thing. Terrence is family now. You two been together 6 years. You gonna ruin his whole life over some money?" Imani was standing at the window of her new apartment in Midtown. A 2-bedroom COU Holdings had helped her secure while the Tudor situation resolved. She looked at the skyline. She thought of every family holiday she had spent apologizing for Terrence's absences, every phone call where Cheryl had told her to be more patient, more understanding, more forgiving. "Aunt Cheryl," she said, "he forged my signature to steal $380,000 from me. He took out a life insurance policy on my life, and when I begged him to let me stay on the porch in a thunderstorm, he told me to walk. If that is family to you, then I need you to understand that I am building a different family. I love you, but I will not be discussing this again." She hung up. Her hand was shaking. She stared at the phone for a long moment. Then she picked it back up and called her sister. Nia answered on the second ring. There was a beat of silence, and then Nia said, in a voice thick with unshed tears, "I saw the news yesterday. I've been waiting for you to call. I've been waiting for a year, baby sister." Imani sat down on the floor of her new apartment and cried the way you cry when someone finally holds the door open, after you've been standing in the cold for a long, long time. Listen, if this story is hitting you somewhere real, if you're sitting there thinking about the aunt who told you to stay, the friend who told you to forgive, the family member who said he's a good man while you were bleeding, do me a favor right now. Comment the word boundary below. Because someone else scrolling past this story needs to see that word today, and you might be the reason they find it. And if you're still here with me, the hardest part is coming, because the courtroom was one thing. But what Terrence did next, when he realized he was actually going to lose, That was something else entirely. The federal case moved faster than anyone expected. Grace Coe had assembled a file so tight it whistled. Bank records, forged signatures side by side, wire transfers to Chelsea Voss's account, and the recorded phone inquiries Terrence had made to a Nevada firm about life insurance payout timelines. His lawyer floated a plea in early March. Imani rejected it. She wanted the trial. She wanted him to sit in a courtroom while she said his name out loud. The trial began on a bright Monday in April in a federal courthouse on Ted Turner Drive. Imani wore a tailored navy suit her sister Nia had helped her pick out over FaceTime the night before. She wore her grandmother's small gold cross under her collar. She wore no makeup except lipstick, a color called Justice, which she had bought at a MAC counter with her own money, laughing at the name in the mirror. She testified for 3 hours. She did not cry. She did not raise her voice. She simply told the truth in the same clear, organized way she had spent 6 years reorganizing indemnity schedules and merger documents. She walked the jury through the accounts. She identified the forgeries. She read aloud the text messages Terrence had sent her in the months before the rain. Messages calling her paranoid, calling her crazy, calling her a bitter black woman who couldn't be grateful. And then she read aloud the text messages he had sent Chelsea Voss on the same days, laughing about how easy Imani was to manipulate. The courtroom was silent. 2 jurors were crying. Chelsea Voss, who had already accepted a plea in exchange for testifying, would not look at her. Terrence took the stand on day 4. His lawyer had told him to appear humble. Instead, under cross-examination, he lost his temper. When Grace Coe calmly asked why he had taken out a life insurance policy on Imani without her knowledge, he snapped, "Because she was worth more to me dead than alive, all right? That's what you want me to say?" He realized what he had said about half a second after he said it. The jury did not need the other half second. The verdict came back in 6 hours. Guilty on 11 federal counts. Sentencing was set for July. Imani walked out of the courthouse on Ted Turner Drive into a wall of cameras. She had prepared for this moment with the publicist Dohyun had introduced her to, a sharp, kind woman named Aisha Bello, who had spent 3 weeks teaching Imani how to speak to the world without letting the world define her. Imani stopped on the steps. She looked into the cameras. She did not smile, because a smile was not what the moment called for. 6 years ago, she said, I fell in love with a man who told me he wanted to build a life with me. What he actually wanted was to build a life on top of me. Today, 12 strangers looked at what he did and called it what it was, a crime. I am grateful to them. I am grateful to my attorneys. I am grateful to my sister, who never stopped waiting for me to come home to myself. She paused. And to any woman watching this, if the person you are loving keeps asking you to disappear, that is not love. That is theft. Stop paying it. She walked down the steps. She got into the black car waiting for her. Dohyun was in the back seat, because he had promised he would be there when it was over, though he had not attended a single day of the trial, a boundary he had held so that no defense attorney could ever suggest her testimony was coached by a foreign investor. He looked at her. She looked at him. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Like I can breathe," she said. And for the first time in 6 years, it was true. 2 weeks after the verdict, on a warm Saturday afternoon in May, Imani opened the door of her midtown apartment to find her father standing in the hallway. She had not seen Marcus Beaumont in 11 years. He looked smaller than she remembered. His hair was more gray than black now. He was wearing a church shirt tucked into pressed jeans, holding a cheap bouquet of grocery store carnations like a shield. "Hey, baby girl," he said. Imani did not move from the doorway. "How did you get my address?" "Cheryl gave it to me. I know I ain't got no right to be here. I know that. But I saw you on the TV, saw what that man did to you, and I couldn't just—" His voice broke. "I couldn't just sit down in Savannah and pretend I still had the right to be your daddy from a distance." She let him in because her grandmother's ghost would have haunted her if she hadn't. She made him coffee because her mother's ghost would have haunted her worse. She sat across from him at the small kitchen table and she waited. He talked for a long time. He talked about the drinking that had swallowed him after her mother died. He talked about the shame that had made it easier to disappear than to show up broken. He talked about a woman named Denise who had helped him get sober 4 years ago, and about the AA chip in his pocket that he took out and slid across the table like an offering. He said the words, "I'm sorry," 7 times. She counted. Then he said the thing she had been waiting for. "Baby, I know we got years to make up, and I know you doing good now, but I saw them articles say you working for that Korean man, and, Imani, I don't like the way that looks. A young black woman, no husband, living off some foreign billionaire's paycheck. People are gonna talk. Your mama wouldn't want that for you. Come home to Savannah. Let me take care of you for a while. Let me be your daddy again." The apartment was very quiet. Imani looked at the man across from her, the man whose voice she had missed her whole adult life, the man whose approval she had once thought she would trade almost anything for. And she realized, sitting there, that the old Imani would have said yes. The old Imani would have folded herself into a shape small enough to fit his idea of a daughter, because his approval was a wound she had been trying to close for a decade. The new Imani reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. "Daddy," she said gently, "I love you. I'm so glad you're here. I want you in my life. I want to come to Savannah for Sunday dinners. I want you to walk me down the aisle if I ever get married. I want my children, if I have them, to know their grandfather." She squeezed his hand. "But I am not coming home to be taken care of. I am not living off anyone's paycheck. I earn $180,000 a year at a job I got, because I am excellent at what I do. Nobody is talking about me except people who have nothing better to do, and if my life makes them uncomfortable, that is a gift I am giving them. Mama did not raise me to be small, so that other people could feel large, and you, Daddy, with respect, do not get to come back after 11 years and ask me to shrink so you can protect me from a world I already learned to stand up in without you." His eyes filled with tears. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he nodded slowly. He took his hand back. He wiped his face. "You sound like your mama," he said. "Lord, you sound just like her." "I know," Imani said. "That's how I know I'm doing it right." The Tuesday after her father flew back to Savannah, with a promise to come up in June and a standing invitation to call any time, Imani walked into the Seo Holdings Atlanta office on the 31st floor of a glass tower on West Peachtree, and Managing Director Julian Park called her into his office and offered her a promotion. She had been on the job less than 5 months. "Compliance lead for North American operations," Julian said, sliding the offer letter across the desk. "You would oversee cross-border regulatory work for all our U.S. acquisitions. You would build your own team, starting salary $240,000, plus performance bonus, plus equity vesting over 3 years. Imani read the offer twice. Then she asked, in the calmest voice she could manage, "Did Mr. Seo authorize this?" Julian smiled. "Miss Beaumont, Mr. Seo has been overseas for 6 weeks. This decision is mine. And frankly, I made it 3 weeks ago. I've been waiting for legal to finalize the equity structure." "May I ask why?" Julian leaned back. "Because in the last 4 months, you have caught 2 errors in acquisition documents that would have cost this company somewhere in the neighborhood of $9 million. You have built a working relationship with our sole legal team that my previous compliance lead could not manage in 3 years. And last week you politely told a very senior Korean board member that his proposed structure violated FinCEN reporting requirements, and you did it in a way that made him respect you more, not less. I am not promoting you because you are a good story. I am promoting you because if I do not, someone else will hire you within a year, and I am not stupid." Imani signed the offer letter that afternoon. She did not call Dohyun. She did not call her father. She did not call anyone at first. Instead, she walked to a small jewelry store on Peachtree that her grandmother had loved, and she bought herself a thin gold bracelet with a single small diamond, and she had the inside engraved with her mother's name and one date, the date her mother had died. She fastened it on her wrist and looked at herself in the mirror above the counter. The woman looking back at her had not been carried here by a Maybach. The Maybach had opened a door. The woman had walked through it on her own 2 feet, in her own shoes, and had climbed 31 floors on the strength of her own mind. She called Nia from the sidewalk outside the store. "I got promoted," she said. Nia screamed so loud Imani had to hold the phone away from her ear, and then they were both laughing and crying on a Tuesday afternoon in Atlanta, and Imani thought, This is what my mother wanted for me. Not saving, not rescuing. This. That night, she made herself dinner in her own kitchen, in her own apartment, paid for with her own money, and she raised her glass of wine to the empty seat across from her, and she said out loud, "Thank you, Mama. I'm home." Dohyun returned from Seoul in early June. He asked her to dinner not at one of his restaurants, but at a small Ethiopian place in Old Fourth Ward that his driver had recommended. He wore jeans. She had never seen him in jeans. They ate injera with their hands, and he asked her about the promotion, and she told him she had earned it without him, and he said, "I know. Julian showed me the paperwork after he sent it. I would have been angry if he had asked my permission." They walked afterward along the Beltline, past murals and food trucks and joggers, and for a long time they did not speak. The sun was setting over the tree line. At a bench near the Krog Street tunnel, he stopped. "Imani," he said, and it was the first time he had used her first name. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it as information, not as a request." She sat down. He sat beside her, keeping a careful distance. "The night I saw you in the rain," he said, "I made a decision that had nothing to do with a case file from 3 years ago. I told you the case file version because it was true, and because it was safe. The full truth is that I had been divorced for 2 years, and I had promised myself I would not notice a woman again until I understood why my marriage had failed. And then I saw you kneeling on a wet sidewalk with a Bible in a puddle, and I noticed you. Not because you were beautiful, although you are, but because you were kneeling and still refusing to look defeated. That combination is rare. I built the case file justification in the car on the way to the hotel, because I needed a professional reason to give you what you needed." She listened. She did not interrupt. "I have kept every boundary I promised you," he continued. "I will keep every one of them for as long as you want them kept. I am not asking for anything tonight. I am telling you the truth, because you deserve to make your choices with complete information, and because I do not want to be one more man in your life who managed you." Imani looked at the sunset. She thought about the woman she had been in October, sitting in the back of a Maybach with a trash bag on her lap. She thought about the woman she was now. She turned to him. She reached across the careful distance and took his hand. Her decision, her pace, her hand extended first. "Dohyun," she said, "I am not ready for anything more than dinner, and walks, and conversations. For a while, maybe a long while." "That is not a small thing," he said quietly. "No," she said, "it isn't. And I want you to know something too. I am not going to love you because you saved me. If I ever love you, it will be because you kept showing up as a whole person while I became a whole person. And you will have to keep earning that, same as I will." He nodded. He turned her hand over and looked at the thin gold bracelet on her wrist, at her mother's name, and he did not ask about it. He just closed his fingers gently around hers. "Deal," he said. They watched the sun set over Atlanta together, two whole people sitting on a bench, holding hands like it was the beginning of something and not the end of a rescue. There was no wedding scene. There was no ring. There was no music swelling over a slow-motion embrace in the rain. There was a woman named Imani Beaumont, who, 1 year after being thrown out of a house on Peachtree Battle Avenue with a trash bag and no shoes, stood in front of a graduating class of paralegals at Georgia State University and gave a commencement speech about what it means to invest in yourself before you invest in anyone else. There was a woman who bought a small brick bungalow in Kirkwood in her own name, with her own money, and painted the front door the exact shade of yellow her mother had loved. There was a woman who flew her sister and her father up for Thanksgiving, and cooked a turkey badly, and laughed until she cried at her own kitchen table, and did not once apologize for taking up space in her own house. There was a man named Dohyun Seo, who was, slowly and honestly and without hurry, becoming her partner. Not her rescuer, Not her provider, her partner. A whole person walking beside a whole person, on their own 2 feet, choosing each other on purpose, one day at a time. Terrence Whitmore was sentenced to 9 years in federal prison. Chelsea Voss got 3. The tutor on Peachtree Battle was sold, the HELOC was voided, and the money Imani recovered was placed in a trust that funded scholarships at Georgia State for young Black women pursuing legal careers. The first scholarship was awarded in her mother's name. If this story moved something in you, I need you to do 3 things. Share it with the woman in your life who is still carrying somebody who won't carry her back. Comment below and tell me the name of one thing you are going to stop paying for in the life of someone who does not deserve you. And subscribe to this channel, because next week I am telling you the story of a nurse in Detroit who walked out of a 12-year marriage with 2 suitcases and became the CEO of a hospital system by the age of 40. And you are not going to want to miss it. Imani Beaumont did not get a fairy tale ending. She got something better. She got herself back.